Good evening. I'm Alicia Barnes. We are coming to you now to cover the breaking developments as former President Donald Trump lands at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. He's headed now to turn himself in at the Fulton County Jail tonight. And of course, our chief legal analyst, Colleague Rhodes, joining me here to be able to give us more context as to what we're seeing. Let's take you live there at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. As you're seeing now, the president walking off of his plane. And we're seeing Khalif, I guess his now new legal team, and we're going to talk about that too, joining him as he heads to the Fulton County Jail.
The ever-shifting landscape, obviously he's attempting to find the best legal team that can support whatever legal strategy that he thinks will assist him in this mounting legal avalanche of cases. I mean, this fourth indictment, it is a mountain to climb, and so as folks jump off the team and jump back on, I know that will create pitfalls, not just for him, but for the legal process in general. Down there in Georgia, this state case will move a lot faster than those federal cases will. And so he better move quickly with grabbing new attorneys to be able to maneuver through this 90-plus page indictment that was brought against him.
Again, you're taking a live look here at the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport right now. Former President Donald Trump facing multiple criminal charges stemming from his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. Now, Trump isn't expected, Khalif, to spend much time at Fulton County Jail. Of course, the sheriff there has indicated that he would be treated like any other person, and that means that he will be booked, he'll be photographed, making him the first U.S. president featured in a mugshot, but there is some pushback on that right now that we're hearing today, that might not happen.
I think that's all fluff. There's no way that there can be pushback. The sheriff, he said it himself. He said, listen, I will treat him like any other defendant that comes through this process unless I'm told otherwise. And so you've seen the other co-defendants that have been already booked through the system. Their mugshots have been released maybe a few hours later. I don't see this process becoming anything different. And the other portion is I don't see any legal standing for them to be able to do that. There's nothing that should say because he's the former president or because he's a presidential candidate that he cannot have a mugshot in or have his mugshot released. If the process is to treat him fairly, and his defense has already said that there is this equal or two-tier justice system, to not have your mugshot released would kind of go against that argument that it's a two-tiered system. Every other defendant, I've been in the Fulton County system, I've seen how it works. Everyone that passes through that door gets fingerprinted, gets a mugshot, and if they're going upstairs, they change their clothes and they go through that process. Now, his team has already created a consent release, and so we know that the conditions for release have already been set. Those are things that are typically outside the normal scope as well.
Right.
But for sure, a mugshot, I could not see any rationale, both legally or any other reason for him to have his mugshot not taken, but then also released.
Let me give you a perspective as to what you're seeing right now. Okay, so they're now leaving the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, and give you some perspective as to where they're going. The Fulton County Jail. Khalif, you've been there. I'm from Atlanta. It's probably about, maybe I'd say about 25, 30 minutes away. It's in pretty much the heart of Atlanta is where they're going. So you can be able to see they're on the road there. I also recently, just moments ago, got a copy of the consent bond order filed in the Superior Court in Fulton County. I want to talk about that now because when you talk about what looks pretty typical, Trump is set to be released on a $200,000 bond, and that stipulates that he can't intimidate witnesses or other defendants or even take any action that would obstruct the administration of justice. Now, it was a pointed warning about his history of attacks against the district attorney, Fonnie Willis, and other prosecutors, but changing his legal team just hours before he was slated to surrender. Put this into perspective for us.
I mean, those meetings sometimes when you're talking to a client, and I mentioned this the other day, I don't take every client that comes to me. And so obviously the biggest thing that I'm looking for is a communication, both them being able to hear what I'm saying and understand it, and for me being able to believe what they're saying. So sometimes I may give a client information that they don't want to hear, and it may be hard for them to digest. But if they're able to listen to my counsel that they're paying for and to be able to respond to that in an appropriate manner, the relationship between attorney-client is really a smooth one. However, there are bumpy times in the relationship, just like any relationship, where a person may not want to hear what you're advising them. I think comparable to a doctor-client relationship, where the doctor may tell you that you have something and you may want to go get a second opinion.
Right.
Well, in the legal world, you can't get a second opinion because if you're represented by an attorney, in that case, another attorney can't just come and jump in. The other attorney, the first attorney, will have to step down,
Right.
and a new attorney can get in the case. And so that can happen. Sometimes the strategy or the defense that you're attempting to go for, there may not be any precedent for it. There may not be any legal background for it. And so that attorney may be uncomfortable with going forward with that approach.
One of the things that we're seeing here as they take the trip from Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport to the Fulton County Jail, this is a scene you don't often see in Atlanta. There's no traffic.
Zero traffic.
Right now,
7 o'clock
at 7 o'clock at night.
For sure.
There's clearly, they have made a way for the former president to be able to get to the jail in an expedited amount of time.
I know I've done that drive a number of times, and it wouldn't take me 15 to 20 minutes to get there. It may take about 45 to an hour to get from that location just based on traffic, and it's normally not that smooth. And so, for sure, it seems like they've already shut down the roads for him to get from the airport to there to hopefully expedite this process a little bit more. But when you mentioned the bond and getting an opportunity to see it, one of the things that I thought was telling was that, okay, we already knew it was $200,000,
right.
but when we saw it, seeing that $80,000 of it was set aside for the RICO portion.
Yes.
But it connects. If you look at the size of this case, there's a number of counts. But that first count was the RICO count. There's 161 different acts in the RICO count. And so that's the larger portion of the acts. It dates from November 4th to September of 2022.
Right.
November 4th of 20. So 2 years, they were literally investigating all of the actions. And so that 80,000, if you're breaking it up to what's the most important part, the RICO obviously is the larger part of the entire case.
So I have a copy of that consent bond for Donald Trump that was filed in the state of Georgia right here, looking at this. And just as you said, when you look at those, the breakdown of the 200,000, the 80 for the RICO, but then everything else for the criminal solicitation and criminal conspiracy, it says 10,000. Is this normal of what we would be seeing?
I mean, what you're attempting to do is make sure that the charges are similar in terms of the amount for the release condition. And so where you have all those other ones that are listed as 10,000, they're all similarly type of crimes.
Okay.
That's solicitation. And that's the part that I want a lot of folks at home to make sure they're looking at. Take a chance to read the indictment. From the Trump's team, there's been a lot of talk about this is just a first attack on the First Amendment. And this is not what they're saying. They are saying you have an ability by the First Amendment to say certain things, but your actions after that is what made it criminal. Asking other individuals to violate the oaths of office that they took was probably the largest piece. When I read this entire indictment over the last few days, is trying to figure out, well, how does Fani Willis and her team decide to attack Donald Trump's defense?
Right.
The biggest thing is they're saying his First Amendment is First Amendment. No, it's your actions.
Right.
You were asking a number of elected officials to not do their job, to not follow their oath, to not follow their state and or federal constitution. And that's where the criminality took place. And that's where it's an overall conspiracy. You have 19 plus individuals that are indicted. But the other key is that there's a number of unindicted co-conspirators that are mentioned in here that know the actions that they did and that right now they're just not charged.
Right.
And so there's other folks that are sitting at home that should be lawyering up as well, getting ready to go through this same process that the former president is doing right now.
Taking a look there as former President Donald Trump traveling from Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. They're making their way through very quickly because obviously they have shut down I-85, I-75 there to be able to get them right to the downtown area. And traveling from the airport to downtown Atlanta normally, especially at 7:22 at night, would probably take you a good 30, 40 minutes.
Stop and go the whole time.
If not. So this ride here looks like it might take them maybe 10, 15 minutes to be able to get right there. As it looks right there, they look like they're almost to Cortland. I'm from Atlanta. You've worked there in Fulton County, so this is an area that's very familiar to both of us of where they're heading to the Fulton County Jail on Rice Street.
I enjoyed my drive up because I was coming from south of Atlanta in the morning because it was extremely early, but around this time of night is when I would be leaving, and I dreaded this because I know I would dedicate an hour to drive that should have probably taken me 15 to 20 minutes. And so this is not something that's normal for Atlanta traffic, but I'm glad that this will allow the process of him going through the booking process to get started.
I'm counting at least 10 SUVs. Is this about what you had expected that you would see?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you're talking about the former president, so you have to have all of his team, both attorneys and his Secret Service entourage, his protection that will be there to ensure that he's safe. And so I would expect nothing less than that. That's about the same amount that we saw when he was in Manhattan. That's about the same amount that we saw when he was in Miami as well. And so that's about a normal in terms of protection for him. That's something that I would want to see,
Right.
because you have folks that are on both sides that are making all kinds of statements, and you don't want anybody to do anything crazy. You want the legal process to play itself out, and you don't want anybody to do anything extremely radical. And so obviously, as much protection as possible to ensure that he can get from location A to B without any interruption.
All right, let's talk about other people named in this indictment, specifically Mark Meadows. Earlier today, Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows surrendered on charges related to efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Now, the jail released his mugshot, as you can be able to see right here, his bond set at $100,000. Now, Meadows is just one of nearly 20 Trump allies facing several charges related to the Georgia elections investigation. You see, Rudy Giuliani had around the same amount. I think it was 150,000.
Yep.
You see Mark Meadows with 100,000 as a bond. But when you look at other people who were named in the indictment, different bonds, lesser bonds, is this about what you would expect?
100%. You're always looking at whoever the top tier person is, and they would normally have the larger amount. So you have the former president with 200,000+, and then it trickles down after that. I clearly would have expected Rudy Giuliani to have the second highest. His name is littered throughout this whole indictment, maybe the first 30 to 40 pages. He's on every page, and so you would anticipate that he would have the second highest. And then Meadows, obviously, as the third. He was his chief of staff. He had direct contact with him, and he is mentioned in here having direct contact with a number of other co-conspirators. And so I think those three clearly should have, and that falls within the normal when you're talking about a co-conspiracy with folks. And they're saying if the president or former president was the director of this conspiracy, that they were moving and acting under the direction of the president, yeah, you would expect him to have the higher amount.
Let's talk about who you're seeing right here. These are other people who have already surrendered right now. Scott Hall. He has surrendered. He's a Georgia bail bondsman, Fulton County Republican poll watcher. Hall turned himself into the Georgia authorities Tuesday. And then you have Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani. He turned himself in yesterday. As we just announced, too, his bond was set at $150,000. And then you have Kenneth Chesebro. One thing I want to talk about with Kenneth Chesebro is it's reported that he wants a speedy trial.
October 23rd. He wants it set now. First of all, he requested a November date. And Fannie Willis and her team said, okay, we'll one-up you, and we'll ask for an October date. And the judge granted the October date. Now, do I believe that they will actually go to trial in October? Probably not. There'll be pretrial motions. There'll be a number of things. But the request is a speedy trial request. And so most states have a speedy trial request. North Carolina does not have one by statute. So constitutionally, under the United States Constitution, you have a speedy trial request. But in Georgia, like most states do, they have a speedy trial statute. And so it is the right of the defendant, not the state. And so he made the request. And normally that's kind of like, all right, we're ready. You want to charge me? Most defendants will delay. But if you believe you have a strong case and you believe that what you did was 100% right, I'll call your bluff. I'm ready to go to trial today. And so I don't think he was expecting for her to ask for a faster date.
But do you think that was part of strategy? Because if Fannie Willis, the district attorney out of Fulton County, is saying that you want to charge everybody together, and here you have one person who says, hey, I want a speedy trial. Then you've got other people who say, hey, I want my trial taken from state court to federal court. Is this a strategy? Do you think are they talking, or is everybody at this point on their own?
I don't think that it's a strategy. I think for him, he has a better chance with his case. I mean, if I'm looking at the culpability for each of the folks that are listed in this indictment, I mean, he's a former scholar, someone that knew the Constitution front to back, and he's saying, I'm advising them on the things that I think that he should be able to do, and if not, what I was doing, there was nothing illegal about what I was doing. I was giving advice, and because I was giving advice, I should be protected for that advice. I am kind of with him in terms of wanting to get my trial over with before the circus comes to town. Everyone can attempt to do their own strategy, but I don't think they are acting in concert, even though they are all co-defendants. I don't think they're acting in concert with their defense right now.
As you see right there, they're right there by Morehouse College. That's actually the Morehouse Stadium right there on the right-hand side of your screen as they're going by, making their way to the Fulton County Jail. I mean, Khalif, they made it there in record time. I think they started the landing was about maybe 7:15. It's now 7:30, 30 minutes getting into downtown Atlanta. I mean, they're traveling at a very high-rate speed. But they expect this to be rather quick, this whole process, once he gets to the Fulton County Jail.
I mean, you're talking about maybe 5 to 10 minutes if everything is already taken care of in terms of what is conditions for release. And we already know that because we have the conditions for release. And so the process of being fingerprinted and taking a picture and going through and getting any type of inmate number that you may be associated with a person, even if they don't go upstairs into the booking or intake process, they would still give them a number. And so that portion is extremely slow. It's quick. It's not something that would take a long time. But one of the things that I think that is extremely telling that we don't want to lose on this moment is that this is the 4th time that this is happening. And so sometimes I think we are becoming numb to this. But this is still the former president of the United States that is, for the first time ever in history, about to have a mugshot. And so that portion, as I slow down and think about what's happening today, it is still like a wow, where were you at type of moment. And so I'm trying to, from a legal perspective and from a political perspective, give my views on it, but then I'm still trying to just digest what's happening. Not even thinking about the election, but thinking about where we are as a country, period, and how folks are staking their sides and deciding guilt or innocent before anything has actually become the court. But the moment itself today is something that I think folks should not forget, and it shouldn't be something that is politicized. This is our criminal justice process, and this is a integral part of it. Any case is started with the papering of an indictment. The grand jury indicted this individual. He happened to be the former president. So this is all normal within the criminal justice process.
And when you talk about just kind of taking in the moment of a former president having a mugshot, that was a big discussion today. I think for the last few days, as you saw other mugshots trickle in, like Rudy Giuliani, and then Rudy Giuliani speaking about his mugshot almost as if it was a badge of honor, there seemed to be different discussions today, whether that's going to happen, and we don't know. We're hearing that former President Donald Trump might get a mugshot, but we'll know in these next few minutes here when he checks into the Fulton County Jail.
I mean, the badge of honor is something that is definitely a shift. I mean, because the criminalization or the most of these individuals that have been charged are business owners, they're attorneys. That last shot that we had, 3 of the individuals on the screen were all attorneys. And there was a big fight over the last few years of removing the box. When you talk about people that have criminal past and having to check whether they had a felony conviction and how it was stopping them from getting employment. And now the shift is these individuals are all charged with numerous felonies and they're wearing it as a badge of honor. And so a part of me is confused on how we've gotten to that point within the criminal justice system where now we are rewarding criminality. And even if, again, everyone is still innocent until proven guilty, but to make it as if it's some joke or a mockery of the system is a step that I want to make sure we're capturing that we shouldn't be doing. For sure, this is something that we should be taking serious, and I know Fannie Willis and her team is taking it very serious.
When you're looking here as to what we're seeing, and that as that shot pulls out and you have a little bit more of an aerial view over Atlanta and looking as they're moving toward the Fulton County Jail, it gives you a better perspective of how much security is out there around the city, blocking off the roads. And just as we've spoke as to how much territory you're covering from the airport all the way to downtown, you know, having that direct shot without traffic. Each time they stop at every stoplight, you can be able to see the amount of officers who are out protecting, making sure that they have a smooth ride in.
I mean, not just the stoplights. I saw even on some of the side streets I mean, so you're probably talking about a few hundred officers that are out there making sure that this process goes smooth. So I can tip my hat to all the individuals that are there working in the city of Atlanta to ensure that this process runs smoothly, because this is coordinated.
Right, and you can see the uniforms there. You have Fulton County, you have the Atlanta Police Department, you have other officials that are there, but the amount of manpower this is taking here as they're now arriving here to the Fulton County Jail on Rice Street in Atlanta, Georgia. Khalif, you've talked about this moment and how you really, you know, even though this is the 4th indictment, you're really taking this moment in. As we see, you know, the SUVs pull into the Fulton County Jail. I mean, this vision that we're seeing here, take me through
There's
how
been
you
some
process this.
key moments in presidential history. November 17, 1973, Richard Nixon tells the nation, "I'm not a crook." November 22nd, 1963, John F. Kennedy is assassinated in Dallas. January 20th, 2009, Barack Obama is inaugurated as the first African-American president. Those are dates that are etched in history because something that the leader of our country, the leader of the free world, did. Today, you can point to today as the first time ever that a mugshot will potentially be released of the former leader of our country. And so I am a historian, and I love the fact that history paints a picture, and it sometimes allows us to miss things that can hurt us in the future.
Now, I have covered several stories here at the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta, and normally this whole parking lot is packed with cars. Because
100%.
because you have people who are being checked in. So they have now cleared out this whole area. You don't see a car in sight. So this is going to allow for the former president to come in, enter, as we should see him get out of one of these SUVs. But talk to us about what this process is going to entail as he walks into the Fulton County Jail.
Well, one thing, when you mentioned that about the parking lot, and earlier, a number of folks all throughout the day have been asking, why so late? Why so late? Why so late? That could be one of the reasons that the president and his team decided to bring him at this time, because during the day, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it would have been a number of cars there that would have been made this process of having the complete road blocked off extremely hard. But now he'll jump out. This is obviously the back entrance. When I was there, I would go through the front entrance, but that back entrance will be connected right to the booking. You see those vans or those overhead, the buses, I should say, that's typically where folks would jump on when they're going to different locations.
See, colleague, this is why we have you, because I have never been behind in this area here.
I've only seen it from
the other
road.
side.
Yeah, I've only seen it from the road.
Right,
but I would come in through the front, obviously, but I would go to that area and I would be able to see it from the back side. But I've never entered through that back gate, not at all.
And so I'm assuming we're going to see him step out and go inside. And I'm not quite sure if we have a camera angle inside the Fulton County Jail. So we're going to be able to see him step inside. And then, of course, you can kind of just take us through the process of what is going to happen. And we have every indication that, as you said, this is going to go very quickly because his attorneys have already got everything settled as to what's going to happen. So is this really just his signature, the fingerprints, the possible mugshot?
Signature, fingerprints, mugshots. I scan as well. Georgia, the state of Georgia uses a biometric scan for every individual that's charged with a crime that comes through the Fulton County system. And so his eye shots will be scanned. His eye retina will be scanned as well.
Okay.
So that will allow him to be identified. I mean, obviously everyone knows that that's the former president of the United States, but that system is put in place for someone to try to, say that, hey, that's not me, that's my brother that you arrested. But you can't fake your eyes. And so you're scanning that biometrics to kind of add an additional layer. Fingerprints is something that's been around for a long time, but this biometrics is something that I think is even an extra level to ensure that you are who we said you were, and that when we arrested you today, 20 years from now, you can't say that wasn't me because your eyes will still match.
Speaking of that, though, when you talk about identification, the purpose of a mugshot is to be able to have a picture of what you look like. Everybody knows what Donald Trump looks like.
And I mean,
so
I think
is that the valid argument as to why is this necessary?
That is the argument, but I don't know if it's a valid argument.
Okay.
And so if we're looking at the trajectory of what our security of knowing who our defendants are, you're first going to say mugshot, then fingerprint, then this biometrics. And the mugshots is something that goes back to even like way back in the Western times when folks were drawing and sketching mugshots of individuals on wanted posters. And so while it is a way to identify the individual, what now it also does is it kind of lingers out there forever. And so once an individual, even if they are found not guilty of a charge, that mugshot lives on the internet. It lives on people's computers forever. I have a number of clients that contact me after their case is dismissed.
Take my mugshot down.
Hey, figure out how you can get it, not just off of the jail's website, but off of media's websites, because it affects their livelihood going after there. And so that's why you have some states that don't release them, that decided not to allow defendants to have their mugshots put into social media and to the internet where it will hurt them later.
And there's two things that really happened today that stuck out for me. Not only are we hearing about the changing of who is going to represent him and his lead counsel, but two, the then pushback of, hey, maybe we don't need a mugshot. And to me, with those combining of those two, I wonder now, did he have a change of heart?
I think for me, the argument when you're changing an attorney, it literally goes to now a communication.
It is,
it's always communication. It's either I'm telling you something that you don't want to hear, or you're asking me to do something that I'm just not comfortable with, and you're just not in reality. Sometimes I can have a conversation with with a client, and they are not hearing anything that I say. and they're asking me to do things that don't connect with logic and don't connect with law.
And then you can say that maybe this relationship isn't working out.
100%. I start with that. I will say, listen, I've given it to you as clean as I can give it to you. You know, I've laid out the law. I've laid out the facts of the case. Oftentimes, that conversation for me happens when I've received discovery. So I get discovery, you know, we've had an initial conversation, and then the day I get discovery, I start parsing through it as fast as I can. And then I see things in there that are different than what my client may have told me. So I start going over it with them. And I start letting them know the strength of the DA's case. And what I'm telling them is something that they may not want to hear, the weaknesses of their defenses and the strengths of the case. And when they're balancing them out, sometimes they're frustrated with the end result of how the scales may weigh for them. And so then it may be, hey, I don't like what you said. And all I can say is, well, I can't change it for you. I want to make sure I deliver honest counsel to my clients so that they can know what they're walking into. If I give them unrealistic expectations, they may go into court and decide to plead not guilty in a case where maybe they should have accepted the plea deal. So it's my job to ensure that I give them everything. At this early stage, I'm thinking that it's a communication issue for sure.
Especially with the changing of attorneys.
Well, and because they don't have any discovery. So all they have is what we have. And so it must be something that the former president is advising them to do. He's saying, listen, you guys should be doing this. Or how come we haven't used this strategy? And they're saying, Mr. President, this is something that you can't do. And at that point, there's a breakdown. And then the one thing that we can also say that is problematic for the former president, Michael Cohen said this a few weeks back, is that the former president doesn't like to pay his legal fees. And so if you have this Save America Fund that's been funding all of your legal defense for the last few months, I mean, churning through $56 million in legal defense funds, and now that money could potentially be running out, it's extremely hard for folks to say, well, can I attach myself to this case where I potentially may not be paid down the road? And that's a real conversation that you have to have.
Looking at the bond consent, that was one of the things that stood out to me that I wanted to make sure that people following this story understand. You hear these numbers of bonds, $200,000, $100,000. According to this, it says that they can pay 10% of that. And that is typically across the board when you go to a bail bondsman after you go through this proceedings here. So after here, will he realistically leave from here and then go to a bail bondsman?
I'm assuming if they've already negotiated that, because they've been working on this all week. And so if they've already negotiated that $200,000 amount, they already have a bondsman set up. I mean, any of the deals that I would do where I can kind of estimate what my client's bond is going to be, I'll have a bail bondsman on deck ready to go. So that once they go and get processed through the system, they'll make that phone call and say, I'm at the bottom of the jail. They've already processed me. The bail bondsman will come in and sign the papers. And so that's an added benefit. You're hiring an attorney, so those steps are kind of already taken care of, and you're not adding additional delay to your client sitting there waiting for a bail bondsman to come. But we are talking about someone that is a billionaire, and so the $200,000 amount, he may decide that I don't want to use a bail bondsman, and I'll just pay it myself. It's not like most average people that would say, I don't have $200,000 sitting around.
Let me give you $20,000.
I'll give you $20,000, or let me put my house up against the $200,000. And sometimes that process happens as well.
Just looking here outside of the Fulton County Jail here on Rice Road in Atlanta, Georgia, you're seeing some movement. It looks like people are just kind of getting out. It looks like security officers. The shot is kind of hazy, but what you're seeing here is in the back. If you count 1, 2, 3, 4 SUVs back, you can be able to see some movement along the side. And explain so people watching this, they can understand. This is the back side of the jail, Khalid?
It is. It's the back side of the jail because the portion where I would enter is the taller portion. That's
here,
over to the right. And it kind of looks like that, but it's obviously the taller portion, and when you come in there, you're going to go through those same security checks. But because I had it when I was with the public defender's office, I was able to get into that same area where they will take him right there. And you would, if I'm coming into the front entry, I would make a right from the entry that I will go in to get to where he's at right there.
And you really ask, you know, I wonder what's taking so long right now because they blocked off the roads, they blocked off everything. There aren't any other cars outside of the people who are connected with former President Donald Trump there at the scene. You'd think they'd go right in.
I was hoping that they would go right in because I know at some point he's going to make a comment or two about the process that's happening right now. And so I would love for him to go in and get the processing started and then go from there.
Our producer just told us his car is under the awning that you can be able to see right there. So that's the car that we're going to zero in and be able to wait for the former president to be able to So you can't see it because it's under the awning, I should say. So, but we'll wait to be able to see if we can see some movement. So you see where the buses are, and then you see the awning, and so the car is underneath there. So you can't really get a good visual. But former President Donald Trump facing multiple criminal charges, of course, stemming from his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. Looking at this case here, as we mentioned before, for some, they're trying to be able to have this move to federal court. And so is there an argument there from your perspective, Khalif, that you can see that that realistically can happen? I know right now the judge said no and said keep this process here on the state level going, but long term and looking forward, what kinds of things can you tell us?
I mean, the argument that Mark Meadows has made and a couple other individuals are making is that if I'm under the direction of an individual that is a federal employee or a federal official, or I am myself a federal official, then I am doing something that is under the purview of federal law. And the other portion is I have to have a federal defense to that claim. And so for Mark Meadows, those are the two things that he'll be able to prove. To his argument to the judge was, while you are deciding if my case will be removed from state court to federal court, I also do not want to turn myself in to this process. I don't want to have to adhere to the Friday deadline.
Right.
And that process is where the judge said, you know what, you have to turn yourself in because there's no law that says that I can stop or pause or put some injunction over your case while we wait for me to make a decision. So he told him that I will be denying your request for the temporary injunction while I still decide if your case can be removed to federal court.
Explain to me right now, it's Thursday. The deadline is tomorrow, and there's still, I think, 8 people who have not surrendered.
For sure.
So when you look at that, what is that saying? Why are they waiting?
I have no idea why most of these individuals are waiting. I can only point to the president's action because his was strategic. You know, the debate was on Wednesday. I want to ensure that I don't turn myself in on Tuesday and give my opponents any more additional ammunition to attack me on that stage. So I have a window between Thursday and Friday. Thursday looks like the best day because Friday, even though we've already negotiated my consent release, something else could have happened where I may make my process a little bit longer. And so Thursday, is it morning? Is it evening? Okay, it'll be evening. It's prime time. I can control the narrative. Some of these other individuals may still be trying to find attorneys. They may still be trying to figure out, well, what does this process look like for me? Some of these individuals that are not billionaires may be trying to figure out, well, do I have $50,000 to bond myself out of jail once I go through the booking process?
You're looking at their former president, Donald Trump. This is when he was coming off of his plane at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport earlier. His motorcade has already arrived now to the Fulton County Jail. But this, you can be able to see, he just gave a thumbs up as he was coming off the plane there. And now they're here at the Fulton County Jail. In terms of the distance from where the airport was to the jail, is probably about the way they made it. Maybe it was 15, 20 minutes. They made it into the downtown area. I want to take you, though, as we're waiting to be able to see what's going on there at the jail. Earlier today, Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows surrendered on charges related to efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And the jail released his mugshot. Hopefully we can pull that up for you. His bond now set at $100,000. Mark Meadows that you see right here, I don't think he ever would have thought that he would have had a mugshot. But Khalif, in your expert opinion, when you look at a mugshot, there were a few who were smiling. Mark Meadows looks angry. He looks very, he's taking this very seriously. How do we look at these mugshots that are coming out?
Some of the lower level individuals that are associated with this, the state GOP chairs and individuals like that, have taken those mugshots and made them as their profile pictures on social media. So I think they already kind of pre-planned that I'll use this mugshot to further or, increase my image within the Republican Party. But some of these other individuals, the more seasoned attorneys, they are not taking this, at least this mugshot portion, as a laughing matter. Again, those 3 attorneys that are right there, they know this is something that will live with them throughout their political or their legal careers forever.
When you look at Scott Hall, that to me looks kind of like a little bit of a smile. You
Again, lower level individual in terms of where he ranks within the GOP and in terms of his profession. And then you have these 3 attorneys that are high powered from across the country that do not want this to kind of mar their legal careers for the rest of their life. Remember, a number of individuals that have been associated with the former president have been disbarred. They've been brought up in front of their state bars for ethics complaints. And so this is something that you don't want to have connected to the law degree that you went to law school for and the bar exam that you had to pass. And so those individuals, I think, are at least taking that portion of it serious, even though Rudy Giuliani directly after went outside.
Said it was like a badge of honor.
Right, and so
does that make a difference? I've always wanted to know that, of how you pose for your mugshot. Does that make a difference to a judge?
I don't think so. I think at the sentencing phase, when a judge is talking about if you've taken some type of remorse, normally they're talking about how you have responded either throughout the trial or when you've appeared in front of them. The mugshot, because it's normally earlier on in the process, I don't believe that will be taken into account in terms of your sentence. But normally in the courtroom, if you're smiling or laughing or joking while serious things are happening, like, a homicide or something like this, attempting to overthrow the government, I think a judge at that point would read you your rights and let you know that you have not taken remorse or taken it serious. I mean, this could come back. Everything in this case has directly come back on everyone that was connected to it. Every text message, phone call, social media post that was used against the former president or any of the other 18 co-conspirators has been used in this indictment and the 3 other ones to point to their actions. And so the picture, it could come back to bite those individuals later at some sentencing phase in a negative way, for sure.
And just as we have looked at this indictment in its entirety, as Khalif said, it's always good to be able to look at this and read this yourself. I have a copy of it right here. But we also are now understanding right now, former President Donald Trump has been booked officially. You can be able to see here, this is his booking documents. Khalif, take us through what we're seeing.
I mean, on there, it should be any number that is showing you the bond amount, and it should show you the specific charge. And then over there on the left, it should be some type of count number, and then the offense date. And that's typically what you'd see in a booking intake screen.
And that looked very much to the bond and consent that we had just moments ago, because you can see there at the top it says $80,000 for those RICO charges, and then the sets that are the surety bonds are in $10,000 increments.
For sure. I mean, everything on that screen was something that they had already handed them and delivered it to them. And so, as they had mentioned, he was already going through the process under that awning of attempting to go through there. While we were waiting to see what was happening, most of this was already done.
Preset.
And so I think the next step is once we see the cards pull off, I think we'll know a little bit more. But most of this was already pre-decided. His attorneys did an excellent job of ensuring that their client, A, knew what he was walking into. You'll be walking into the state of Georgia and receiving a $200,000 bond, and you can't talk about the case or intimidate other folks. That's an advice that you want to give your client so they don't say that you didn't advise me properly.
Now, we're hearing, though, that former President Donald Trump may make a comment to the cameras. What if he is limited in so much that he can't say, what then can he say?
Well, I would tell him, if I'm advising him, if I'm in that van with him or that SUV, one of those cars, I'm telling him don't say anything. If I'm his political director, I'm probably telling him to say everything you can that's close, very close to not talking about the judge, not talking about the DA, and not talking about the specifics of the case. Talking about how the government is overreaching, how they're using this as some type of ploy to remove a political candidate. Say all those things. But if I'm advising you as your attorney, I'm telling you to get back on the plane and go to Bedminster, go to anywhere else and go outside of this state and don't post about it on the way. One of the things that I thought that we haven't really hit on is this letter that was sent to the DA today.
Right.
The letter that said that now she's under investigation by the Congress. And so for me, that is something that they did to Alvin Bragg back in April when he indicted the former president in Manhattan. And this is something, again, that they're doing with the DA here in Georgia. And so this letter, it is something that is unique. It's something that is new. I mean, one of the things that I thought was pretty crazy, it says, they say, turning first to the question of motivation. It reads to me like that she is the subject of a criminal indictment as opposed to being the person that's prosecuting an individual that is the subject of a criminal indictment.
But the fact that this is the repeat of this, as you said, it was done with Alvin Bragg. Don't you think they were expecting this?
Oh, I think she was 100% expecting this. Her and her team are ready for this. One thing that I think they mentioned in here that is of note is where they said, well, on your campaign page, you are mentioning this very thing as something as, as a badge of honor or a plus sign for you. But most candidates will do that. If you're running for office, you're going to list your achievements. You're going to list your resume. And I don't know of anything else you can list on your resume that's more impressive or a larger badge or a star than an indictment against the former president. listed.
Right.
I think it would be a misstep if you didn't have that on your campaign website. But the connection that they're attempting to make, that her motivation for this entire investigation is to garner some type of additional campaign funds, I do think that may be a bit of a stretch, because remember, this investigation has been going on for 2 years.
Right.
And so that would be an extremely long time to be planning to release now this investigation, so hopefully you can get a couple, extra $1,000 for this race. We're not talking about a race for president. She's not raising, millions of dollars.
Right.
She's running for DA in Fulton County. I mean, so maybe a few $100,000. But the motivation line, I think, jumped off the page to me, because the criminalization of a district attorney is something that is unique to this case. Typically, you would not see individuals doing that. And for it to happen multiple times for the former president's 4 indictments is something that I think is uncharted territory.
Right. Well, the breaking news right now, Donald Trump surrendering at the Fulton County Jail. It seems that the process is about over. We're going to start seeing some movement here, probably coming from the SUVs that you see that are on the outside of the Fulton County Jail. Again, the breaking news right now is former President Donald Trump surrendering at the Fulton County Jail. And as you took us through this process, Khalif, and you said this was going to be relatively quick, he's been in there for about 25 minutes. We don't know right now if a mugshot was taken, but we're trying to be able to get some more indication as to if he was fingerprinted. We thought that's pretty typical. The mugshot is really the one thing that was kind of up in for discussion. As you see the motorcade now pulling off there, looks like the Atlanta Police Department starting them off, and you can see the SUV is now pulling out. They're heading back now to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, where I'm assuming that's where former President Donald Trump might make a comment.
We'd hope so.
As he gets on to his plane and he heads back to New Jersey.
When he had the D.C. Indictment, that he did it right on the tarmac, and so you would expect him to do something there. That would be hopefully the next logical step. But in the other 2 indictments, he went back to Bedminster and had an entire event. And so either one could happen. You really never know. But you mentioned quick and you mentioned timing. Quick is in the eye of the beholder. If I have an individual that's in Mecklenburg County that's processed, it could take 1 hour, it could take 8 to 10 hours. And so even if you do something where you've attempted to arrange them turning themselves in, the process of getting booked and seeing an individual like a magistrate is extremely a long process.
As we wrap up our coverage here, I have to be able to make a note of what we just saw there as one of the SUVs were leaving the Fulton County Jail. You saw somebody with their window down recording what they're seeing from their angle, just giving you more perspective as to this moment in history.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see that footage for sure. I mean, because that's something that none of us will have. Everyone else is looking inside the cars, but that individual was shooting outside of the cars. So for sure, something that they wanted to make sure they documented and captured this moment in time.
We have about 20 more seconds, Khalif Rhodes. Any more points that you want to be able to make out? Anything that stands out to you as to what you just witnessed?
Again, history in the making, for sure, history.
Well, thanks for joining us for our special breaking news update. Khalif Rhodes, our chief legal correspondent, thanks for giving us some more in-depth knowledge as to what we just saw as we send you back to programming. Remember, you can always check us out online at qcnews.com.